All right, welcome back to the Tuesday show. Let's talk about Street Fighter 4 with SF5 coming out next week. In fact, a week from today.
Yep. But just letting you guys know, there will be no Tuesday show.
Actually, I can't make it anyway.
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
It's my anniversary.
Oh, what? Your anniversary's on the day it comes out?
Yep.
Rip.
Yep.
Rip. Well, I'll be streaming myself.
You'll be streaming.
I'll be streaming some Street Fighter 5. In fact, maybe I'll do my first attack episode next week.
I'll be at dinner. I'll be at dinner. We'll be at dinner.
Yeah.
And I'll have this set up right here. Oh yeah, no, great story.
Yeah, you're gonna be that.
I remember that time 4 years ago. Oh,
you're gonna be the person sitting there eating dinner and going, yes! I mean, yes! I do love you very much. Oh, man,
anyway,
that's awesome.
So, with Street Fighter 5 coming out soon, the Street Fighter 4 sort of story, I think, is something that we have to talk about now.
Yeah.
I hope it doesn't die. I hope that people keep it alive.
Yes.
But you never know. And so I think it'd be good to talk about Street Fighter 4's impact, its legacy, how it will be viewed in the future.
How it affected fighting games in general.
Exactly.
Because there's so many different facets, too. Because, it's obvious. There's, when I say how it affected the fighting game community, there's obviously, it brought fighting games back. But I'm talking even more than just that, so.
Well, okay, so just to start off, it definitely did bring fighting games back.
Oh, yeah.
In a really big way. I know that for me, Street Fighter 4 just had a giant impact in my local scene. And I think that was the case for a lot of people. Yeah. Our scene was already pretty big. LA was already a legit scene. But the difference was obvious. I mean, when we were playing HDR, which was the game that was out before Street Fighter 4, we would go to tournaments and whatever. There'd be 15, 20 people. I don't know.
It was the standard fighting game stuff.
Standard.
Yeah.
Street Fighter 4, all of a sudden 50 people, all of a sudden 100 people.
Yeah.
It was a remarkable difference, right off the bat.
Right. How much do you think that GameStop tournament early on had an effect on everything? Because remember how GameStop had that tournament? That was where Mike Ross and Justin got to grand finals. And it really kind of encouraged a lot of people to go play at the GameStops. I'm not sure, how much of an effect that had early on.
I don't know. That was when the game was coming out on console, which was already...
Oh, that's right.
Several months.
That's true.
That was in springtime, and the game came out in the summer. So it had already... Because I was thinking... Mike Ross wasn't good at the start. I remember blowing him up in tournament before he got good. But then it sort of made sense in my head.
Right. Okay.
I'm sorry, Dad. Right. Just ripping on that guy all day for no reason.
We love Mike
But that's
Ross,
how it goes for that guy, unfortunately. So it really did have a major impact in what was already a big scene, but in scenes that were not big. For example, I would go back to where I spent some years in the D.C. area, Northern Virginia, Maryland. I had a lot of friends there, and I went back to visit a few times, and even their locals were much bigger than before. And they were not just having them every month as we had been doing when I lived there. It was weekly. So I mean, it was everywhere, and big obvious impact.
Yeah, and my favorite quote that someone put on the stream, I forgot who it was who put on the stream chat, was when Mike Z just basically said that Street Fighter 4 allowed people to pitch fighting games again. And that's obvious. You can see once Street Fighter 4 came out, once it started getting popular again, it's like everyone tried to jump on this fighting game bandwagon. Every game came back. Every fighting game came back except for Time Killers, And you who knows? There might be some Time Killers reboot ready to come out where you can hit all 5 buttons and behead someone in one sweep.
Right. Yeah, I remember MK versus DC came out in 2008, right beforehand, and that was a pile of garbage. And then it must have been the case that they saw Street Fighter 4 blow up and have a ton of success. Not that MK versus DC did bad financially, it didn't, but the gameplay was bad.
Yeah.
And they spent a ton of time to make MK9 better. And KI came back.
Dude, everything. So the other thing
Indie games were being pitched finally. Yeah.
Right. So, Mike Z could get Skullgirls made, all this things could happen. The interesting part to me also is just that it kind of forced people into upping the quality. Because you just said MKDC was a pile of trash, right? And frankly, MK9 could have been just as bad.
Sure.
But there was something that was like, wait, something's happening here. We really need to reboot this, take this seriously, and make this good. You know, the fact that fighting games started becoming more competitive. Obviously, Twitch has a big deal with this, you know, has a big part in this. The streaming, like, people didn't care about balance. I mean, it wasn't even that long ago that the Blaze Blue creator was laughing at poor Breaker Dave getting killed by Kokonoe, right, at an event. And then 6 months later, or like 4 months later, he's at EVO crying with everybody else at how heartfelt that finals was with Ogura and Galileo. You know, it really changed the perspective on a lot of that. Even Sakurai had to admit, like, I need to make this a little bit more balanced and maybe give a little bit of a leeway for the competitive scene. Right. You know, none of that would have happened without Street Fighter 4.
I think you're right. I think you're right.
Yeah. So I just feel like Street Fighter 4 was super important. And, you know, right now it's the in thing to hate on Street Fighter 4. A lot of people are saying, well, the game was garbage, blah, 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 and all this stuff. Street Fighter 5, I can't wait to play this real game and your real man's game. Like, I feel it because we've been playing this game for 7 years. And once you've been playing a game for 7 years, you're sick and tired of losing to the same things. You know, you're sick and tired of trying to poke with a button, getting focused and getting crumpled and dying, right? I mean, sure, I can see that, right? But in my opinion, well... So I guess we're going to move on a little bit towards the legacy kind of side of where Street Fighter 4 is going to stand in the pantheon of Street Fighter games and the history. I actually think Street Fighter 4, maybe give it a couple of years after everyone's like cooled down a little bit, will probably be remembered as one of the best Street Fighter games of all time. Like I think there's going to be a lot of fondness for this game, given a few years.
I think you're right, and I think that's for a few reasons. One is that I think the game is good. I mean, being good. I too am burned out on it. Okay, I'll say that. I think a lot of people are, but there's a lot of great stuff in that game. And Ultra Street Fighter 4 isn't even that old. It's like a year and a half.
Right.
Relatively recent game. I'm sure there's some stuff left to find. Right, people haven't spent enough time to find everything. That takes a long time.
Play Hakan so I can win money from Xian Cheng.
Never gonna happen. Doesn't even matter. You know, I was thinking about putting out a tier list, my like final tier list for Street Fighter 4, and I was gonna leave Hakan off. Because why bother?
Right.
Anyway.
Look. It's so funny to me because, you know, this just keeps happening, right? I mean, we'll get to this a little bit later. They talked about Alex being in Street Fighter 5, and everyone's like, Alex is so cool. When they announced Mika, everyone's like, oh, dude, I'm so happy Mika's back. And, dude, nostalgia glasses are the most ridiculous thing in the world, right? So, I mean, look, people talk about Third Strike. Like, Third Strike is the most fun game. Like, you don't remember the EVO Top 8s, right? CVS2, the same thing, right? Heck, even at the last Tournament of Champions for ST was just Mao jumping off of walls and stabbing people all day, right? Like, we love these games, obviously, but they're all flawed.
Of course. No game is perfect.
They're all horribly, horribly flawed.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, if you take all of the Street Fighter games, like, for me, honestly, the only game I feel like that can compete with Ultra Street Fighter 4 for being the least flawed Street Fighter game might be Hyper Fighting. But, like, outside of Hyper Fighting, like, I feel like Ultra Street Fighter 4 is, when you look at it from a competitive standpoint, like, the most balanced. It's like a good variety, and it suited a lot of different play styles, you know? So you had the Vipers for the people who wanted to be crazy. Sure. You had Guiles for people who wanted to be zony, patient, or troll with shades all the time, right? You know, it just had a good variety for a lot of different people. It was super balanced. Towards the end, we were seeing every character except for Hakan everywhere. So, you know, I just feel like that once all the burnout is gone, that a lot of people are going to miss the game, and I think a lot of people are going to look back and really look at it fondly.
Yeah, I mean, especially having gone through the process of of seeing and playing Third Strike and CVS2 and Super Turbo all in that what was called the dead era in the mid 2000s, and seeing now how people think about those games, and seeing people in particular talk about CVS2. Oh, they loved CVS2 so much. I tell you, if you weren't a CVS2 player, you did not like it. Right? You were bored. You went to sleep.
Yeah.
Fact.
Yeah.
But now everybody is all, CVS2 is fantastic. That's gonna happen with Street Fighter 4.
Yeah.
And dude, it's not just about the game itself. I think it's about the scene. There are so many more people who came in on Street Fighter 4 relative to those other games that in 5 years there are going to be way more sort of native Street Fighter 4 players as veterans in the scene than there are native any other previous Street Fighter game, just because there were so many more of them. So the scene, I think, in general is going to look back on it and feel very positively. I know I've seen people in chats and whatnot ask questions like, why was Third Strike considered the best Street Fighter game? You know, it's because there were many Third Strike players and they liked the game, and that was it. It's like a numbers game, really. In the FGC. In 5 years, it's going to be Street Fighter 4 instead, and when new Street Fighter 5 fans see people talking about Street Fighter 4, they're going to think, oh, why was that considered the best Street Fighter game? That's going to happen.
Yeah. Now, I do want to address something that Hanzo pointed out in the chat. You know, I talked about balance and everything like that. He said that unbalanced games are fun, and he's absolutely right. 100% correct. I mean, you look at Melee, you look at MVC2, you look at Super Turbo, look at Third Strike. There is something to be said about having these really unbalanced games and having these characters that are underdogs and people really like trying to beat up on the top tier characters and the top tier players just like trolling on the low tier characters and whatever like that. There's definitely a lot of truth to that, but you know, I just feel like from a design aspect, because a lot of people are saying like Street Fighter 4 is a horribly designed game now all of a sudden, like they're coming out of the woodwork, like focus attack was the worst thing, invincible backdash is the most awful thing, you know, all these too many option selects in the game or whatever like that. You know, like I said, I just feel like that's burnout because you're tired of losing to Rose backdashing all day, you're tired of losing to a focus attack. But I honestly don't think a lot of those things are really terrible mechanics, because how many times have people gotten blown up for doing focus attack, right? Against Balrogs, you do focus and then they ultra you and you die, right? As a Kami player, every time I saw focus, I would just do low forward drill. There's nothing you can do, right? So it was equal time that they would get blown up for pulling a stupid thing like that as they would get rewarded. But it's just right now, like I said, the burnout is making everyone sick of those kind of things. So, I mean, I'll get into this a little bit once we move past the legacy portion of, you know, why I feel like having all those systems is actually really good.
Yeah. Well, okay. I guess that for the balance thing, it's true that a lot of the most favorite, most cherished games are imbalanced. I don't think that's why people like them. I think people like having crazy options. And games that have crazy options are harder to balance. So like I really like having a lot of the craziness in Super Turbo and in Third Strike and in whatever other game, Marvel 2, right? I mean, the craziness is awesome, but there are some bad characters, and I feel like that's too bad. It's sort of it's just hard to design all the characters to be good if you design some of the characters to be crazy.
Right.
That's not impossible. I feel like series like Gear did that pretty reasonably, but it is tougher to do. So Street Fighter 4, I'll say one thing, I don't think that it has crazy stuff. It's one of the sort of less crazy games, but at the same time I think that was something that allowed people to get into it. I've seen even some people who are better known for games like anime games and whatnot, Air Dashers, talk about how Street Fighter 4 is just easy to watch comparatively and fun to watch, because it's not the case that you have to pay attention to 10 things happening on the screen at once, and oh man, there's all of a sudden some orb all the way over here. What does that do? There's a little, cat person following you in the air. Like, there's all sorts of stuff in other games that you have to pay attention to that Street Fighter 4, it really just boiled it down. And I feel like that was something that made it more approachable for a lot of people.
Right. So, okay. I mean,
that's not a bad thing.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, honestly, I feel like give it a couple of years, Street Fighter 4 is going to be one of the more fondly remembered games.
I think so,
because so many people got into the scene with it. You know what? I mean, look, I'm going to say this, and it's going to be completely hypocritical because I'm not a fan of it. But, like, it's going to be like the Final Fantasy VII of fighting games. So many people got into it from that game, in this game, that it's going to be, like, everyone's going to remember and love it so much, right? And I say this as a person who doesn't particularly like Final Fantasy VII, right? 6 all the way, man!
I was going to say, so you're implying that it's going to be like how 6 is actually the best. But a lot of these newer school people think that actually it's 7.
Yeah. But I mean, that's where a lot of the fondness is going to come from, you know. So I definitely think the game is going to be remembered very fondly by a lot of people.
I think so too. Well, you sort of brought up your thoughts about the game engine and its ultimate impact. What were you going to say about that?
So basically what I was going to say is the one thing that I did like about the fact that it had invincible backdashes, that it had FADC, that it had, you know, focus attacks and all ultras and super meters and EXs and all these different systems. The reason why I liked it is because, like you said, the game wasn't crazy enough so that you had to keep track of the orbs, or like here's Sinestro's tiny thing that shoots this laser that you can't even see on the screen, you know, those kind of things. You know, it was simple enough that people could get into, but it was complex enough that I really feel like Street Fighter pushed people into a new era of understanding fighting games from a scientific point of view. Like, backdashes got annoying. We really started learning how to option select backdashes, right? Focus attacks got annoying. People learned how to hit confirm low forwards into drill, like I said, if you see the focus attack, you know. Even like the FADC, I really like the FADC option because it kind of, there's still a level of creativity that FADC's afforded in the game. You know what I mean? So, for example, you know, Abel, you're always seeing, okay, you know, step kick, fierce, change of direction, FADC, and then into low fierce ultra, right? But then all of a sudden you see someone like Kaoma or somebody else, you know, anti-air EX, you know, this into FADC into ultra, and all of a sudden you're like, whoa, that's a new way to land that I haven't seen before. Like, all these different kind of things in the game really kind of stepped up the scientific research and the skill set of the community as a whole in finding things. Like, I feel like that it made people so much more smart about fighting games, and it's going to be rough, because what's going to happen is that we're going to figure out a lot of stuff in Street Fighter V very fast. Very fast. But that's because we got so much better because of Street Fighter 4. Like, if Street Fighter V came out at the same time Street Fighter 4 did, I feel like we would be discovering stuff a lot slower. If Street Fighter 4 came out today or next week, we would find things so fast in that game. We would have, like, all the FADC combos, like, instantly, because we just know what to look for already.
Agreed.
Early on in Street Fighter 4, we still didn't know what an option select was.
No, it took a while.
It took a while before we started calling
Half a year
that,
at least,
you know, and you were one of the people who literally started promoting that term as a usage for something in Street Fighter 4. So I just feel like Street Fighter 4 was just the right game to allow people to be creative and to figure out science-y kind of stuff and really have the community get good at finding things and understanding how to dissect fighting games.
I think you're right. Yeah, because it wasn't just in Street Fighter. A lot of the people who learned that stuff then played, like I played a lot of Mortal Kombat, for example, and I found a lot of cool stuff there. But it's not just me; it's people who played Marvel and who switched completely to games like Gear or BlazBlue, or who played all sorts of other stuff that had better language to talk about things with and a better knowledge set. I feel like all that stuff has helped people design games better too, because there are, for example, in Street Fighter V, you can tell the design is specifically trying to avoid some of those things. Like, they specifically don't want to have some option selects.
Dude, Peter said that on the stream today. He was like, we tried to remove all option selects.
Dude, example, in Beta 3, I think, I found, and not just me, other people had found this too, but I put a video out on it with Ken doing fierce, option select, in case of crush counter, into something else that you wouldn't get if you didn't get a crush counter. That's gone.
Right, it's
gone.
They took it out.
So they're really trying. But all that stuff, the reason I could even find that in the first place was 7 years of looking for that crap in Street Fighter 4. So that that sort of lesson was something that is applied to every game, and it helps people design better games because of that. So I think that's good.
And as much as people whine about things that are broken or cheap, like, oh, this character's Yun's too good or whatever like that, I really feel like the fighting game community has kind of stepped into a new era. Like, you think people complain about cheap things right now? Like, you didn't grow up in the Street Fighter 2 era. Like, when you threw somebody, you had to let them throw you back because throws were cheap.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it was literally that way. Like, people would ban things in the game.
Yeah.
Like, it always strikes me when I play Street Fighter 4 online and people throw me. Like, the normal scrub will try to throw me.
Sure.
Whereas in Street Fighter 2, when throws were 0 frame and they reached 10 miles away,
sure,
nobody would throw because it was cheap. You know what I mean? So,
even I remember when Hyper Fighting came out on Xbox Live, this is like mid-2000s, even there a lot of people didn't throw. It was even still like that for a lot of people who hadn't played fighting games in a long time, and they came back because this thing was on Xbox Live Arcade. It was still not like that. Now with Street Fighter 4, and part of this is Twitch as well, as you mentioned earlier. But now when you play Street Fighter, like, the default is walking back and forth in footsie range. Right?
Yeah, that's right.
It's not like jumping around all willy-nilly. It's not like jump roundhouse, low roundhouse like it was for 20 years. Now it's walk around in footsie range, even if you don't know why, because that's what you see people do. That's something people saw in Street Fighter 4.
I went to somebody's house and they had a Japanese Famicom, Super Famicom, and they had Super Street Fighter 2 on there. So I'm sitting there playing, and then like my parents' friends' kids came out and they played with us. I picked Zangief, and he picked Honda, and I did low short SPD, and the guy's like, "Why are you so cheap? Why are you throwing?" I was like, "Really?" Even just before Street Fighter 4 came out, like right before, when UCLA was trying to throw more tournaments, they had a hyper fighting tournament, and I played Zangief against somebody, and I did stand short SPD, and he's like, "You better not do that again." I totally thought he was joking. So I did it again, and the guy literally did this at the console. Like, he went, like, stood up at me and was like ready to fight me. And I looked at him, I was like, "Are you serious?"
When I was in college, this was like 2005, I remember playing Super Turbo against somebody who just walked in, and I was playing Vega, and I just did stand short throw, like probably 3 times. Jesus. And he just left. It was not even a conversation. He was just like, just turned and walked away. That was it.
Oh man, anyway. Dude, I'm telling you, man. So that's one of the legacies that I think Street Fighter 4 brought, is that, and like you said, a lot of it probably does go to Twitch because people get to see a high level play. So the perception of what's cheap has gone from throws are cheap now to Yun is cheap because of dive kicks and a really good lunge, and his EX lunge punch is like 0 on block. Like, I mean, these are like legitimate complaints compared to throws are cheap. For sure. So again,
there's a lot more knowledge in not just in the like dedicated fighting game community, but just people who casually watch and casually play.
Right. And so Street Fighter 4, look, again, I'm burned out of the game. Like, seriously, like, sometimes when we do commentaries, I sometimes feel like I'm like shutting down as I'm doing commentary.
Totally get it.
But I love the game. I really do. I really do love the game. Even being super old school, like, I should be like, screw these new school's tactics or whatever like that. No. Even as an old school player, I really do love the game. And I really, even taking out of the context of where it is in the fighting game, what it did for the community, just as a game, I really loved it because it really was interesting. I felt like it had a lot of cool things going for it, just finding text, finding ways to manage resources was really interesting in that game. I love the fact that, in certain parts of the matches, you'd be like, okay, I have 1 meter, how can I land my Ultra? Like, that wouldn't have happened if they didn't have the meter system, the FADCs, and this Ultra that didn't cost meters. But it's a cool way to, when you're playing the game, you're like, I have 1 meter, this is how I want to land Ultra. I have 3 meters, I have these 3 options, I'm going to look for this. It's just, there was a lot of really cool, fun things about it, and, I look back on it fondly, despite, the fact that, I was, like, they took away my main character. Anyway, I'll get into that. But I really do love the game a lot, and I really think that it will stand the test of time.
I think so too. Yeah, and it's been a blast to watch it evolve. When the game was new, it was considered slow and defensive and not terribly complex. I remember when crouch techs were first found.
Yeah, that's right.
That was a big outcry. A lot of people were very mad, and that actually caused a lot of people to quit who were still playing. Because they didn't like that you could... It was considered like BS defense. It was like so good.
Right.
But then people started to figure out better frame traps. And there was this really interesting series of mix-ups that developed of crouch tech, frame trap, delayed crouch tech, delayed frame trap, stand throw.
Back in the throws. Yeah.
It was a really... And that happened over the course of years.
Yeah.
And along with that, it went from a defensive game... Even in Super, I remember a lot of people thought that game was defensive and the best characters were the charge characters.
That's right, yeah.
Looking back, probably not the case, but that was how we felt about it at the time. A lot of people did. Became an offensive game, became a very setup-heavy game. When Ultra came out and they sort of changed the game a little bit, the setups went away to some degree, but it wasn't just that. It was the fact that everybody knew everybody else's setup.
Right.
Ultimately.
Yeah.
Like you knew, like if somebody did some weird jump short at you when your back was towards the corner, you would know, hey, maybe this is going to cross up, but he's not going to land behind me. And that people learned all these setups, and that all that was a really interesting thing to watch. All of the sort of circle of options back and forth.
Right.
That was something I really, really enjoyed about Street Fighter 4.
Yeah.
I gotta say, I didn't get in on Super Turbo and Third Strike until those games are some years old.
Right.
Or I wasn't there right at the very start, so I didn't really see them as they started. So for me, Street Fighter 4 was the first big game that I really spent a lot of time in, and watched it evolve and helped it evolve. And that was a blast.
That's actually not true. You can crouch tech in Third Strike. It's just the problem was that it would make you do a move, which was you'd parry and kill them.
It was crouching jab. It came out as crouching jab.
Oh, crouching jab, which is parryable both ways.
It is. So not as good, but still important in some situations. You would see Kens do, dash up, crouching jab, jab short, or jab short jab, or whatever, depending.
By starting with a throw or
something.
Starting
with crouch tech. Yeah, you definitely did see that in Third Strike, but it just wasn't as common because crouching jabs weren't as good in Street Fighter 3 as crouching shorts are in Street Fighter 4. It's simple as that.
Yeah, for sure. So, okay. I guess, do you have any other thoughts on Street Fighter 4?
Thank God for the potato, because he's like the only thing that kept me in Ultra Street Fighter 4 for like a year. Dhalsim and Hugo are the only reasons.
Right. The only thing I'll tack on to this is, because of all these things of Street Fighter 4, I really am scared that a lot of people who loved Street Fighter 4 are going to be like, wow, Street Fighter 5 is so boring. We figured it out so fast.
Yeah.
And then what I don't want to have happen is see all the Street Fighter 5 players hating on Street Fighter 4, which causes the Street Fighter 4 players to start hating on 5.
Yeah.
Look, we don't need a melee brawl situation here, right? So, I mean, let's definitely keep things in perspective. Understand that, we're in a different time. We understand games differently. And that Street Fighter 4, like I said, was a good game. And I'm hoping Street Fighter 5 turns out to be an amazing game as well.
I think, I'm hoping that. But in any case, as I said at the start, I hope that Street Fighter 4 doesn't die. I hope that the people who care about the game will keep it going. But realize that it's going to be on you if you are one of those people to keep it going. It's doesn't need to be at tournaments. Okay, It's not like that now. If the game is going to be kept alive, it's going to be by people who care about it. You have to do things like Super Turbo Revival. You have to do things like what Nika KO does for Third Strike.
Right.
You have to do what Marvel...
Tanabor or those guys for Vampire Savior.
Exactly right. You have to do, Marvel Lives or whatever for Street Fighter 4. That's something you have to do now. But I hope that you do it.
Yeah.
I hope that you do it.
Cool. Okay. Well, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll just go back into all the event news, game news, and community stuff that's coming up. A lot of interesting things starting up soon, so be right back. Whoops, I wasn't supposed to do that. Okay, be right back.